You're listening to Contesting Wrestling. This is a podcast that is inspired by the juxtaposition of friendship and a total lack of respect for something. Let me explain. For most of my life, my name is Evan Burke. For most of my life, that I have been aware of professional wrestling, I've thought it was somewhere on a spectrum of dumb to actively harmful to human society. I was born in 1984, so I was the exact right age for the Attitude Era, and I just thought it was the worst thing that could be. However, since also around the time of the Attitude Era, I have had two incredibly close friends, and then a third one who we've been friends 6 years? I don't know, something like that.
I don't know. I showed up at some point.
You're grandfathered in, and I love and respect these people very much. Some of my closest friends, and it's important, especially in these days as we all grow more fractured, to draw those you love closer to you, even if they love professional wrestling and you find it baffling. So I was like, you know what? Let's go on a journey together. Let's go. You guys will be the oxen carrying my cart of wanting to know what's up with wrestling.
Oxen, indeed.
And that wasn't even on purpose. I just was thinking of you guys in harnesses and found it amusing. But yes,
I like to think of myself as the majestic buffalo. Thank you.
You know, a lot of people say that about you. But here, let me allow my co-hosts to introduce themselves, and then we will get to today's a topic that's been a long time coming on this podcast.
So I'm Dr. Ben Abelson, and I am a juxtaposition of being a professor of philosophy at Mercy College and also a lifelong fan of professional wrestling.
My name is Doc Diamondfire. I also can pronounce juxtaposition. I've been in the professional wrestling business about a dozen years now, in the ring, out of the ring, behind the scenes. I've done a little bit of everything, and now I'm doing this. So thank you for listening. And Katie?
My name is Katie Bella. I've been a wrestling fan since 2003, the worst year to start watching pro wrestling. I have been in the wrestling business since 2014. I have been a professional referee since 2017. And now, these days, I've lost control of my life completely.
No, represent. Yeah, I'm right there. I'm right there with you. It's a lot.
I think we're all there.
Who hasn't? Yeah.
The lost control of your life completely demographic is a big one these days.
It's like
ages 20 to 50.
Yeah, ages 20 to 50, right.
Now, today we are delving into the life of the late, great Eddie Guerrero. A guy, one of the few wrestlers I could say I was aware of and had at least a neutral opinion of before we started this podcast, who I knew that Eddie Guerrero was a guy who existed, and I didn't hate him like I hated, I don't know, Steve Austin or something. After watching today's matches, and I've seen some Eddie matches thus far on this podcast, but I would venture a guess that there are a lot of people, not just posthumously, but even people at the time when Eddie Guerrero was alive, I'd be willing to bet there are a lot of people that think he's the greatest of all time.
Many.
Definitely.
Yeah, there are. He'd been referred to as the Mexican Shawn Michaels, which,
it's not inaccurate.
I mean, he's not. Hold on.
He's in my top three at least.
He's not actually Mexican, is the thing. He is from Texas, just like Shawn Michaels. He is an equal to Shawn Michaels. That's really what you have to say about him. He was a little smaller, and he did not have quite as long of a career because he sadly passed. But Eddie Guerrero is one of
ethnically Mexican.
Ethnically Mexican, yes. I'm just pointing out, you can just say he's one of the greatest of all time. He is.
He is, absolutely.
Right. And I would also imagine, as much as people make this distinction, that as many people think he's one of the greatest of all time, even more people would say he is their favorite.
Oh, certainly. I know so many people.
He's the fans' favorite wrestler.
He is the fans' favorite wrestler.
Yeah, which is very fitting.
He's beloved in a way. I say he's in my top three, but I feel like I love Eddie Guerrero more than any other wrestler. even if he's not exactly my favorite.
I feel that
there's-
way too. Like you just love him, you know.
And especially the circumstances of his death made us all love him even more.
Oh
And
God,
we'll probably
get to that.
We'll get into that the
Yeah.
next episode about him. We'll have plenty of death to talk about in this one already.
I mean, it is remarkable how, watching this first match that we did today between two people who you could very much argue that the reason they were such great wrestlers and had such a great match is because of the same dedication that would ultimately kill them and two other people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway, should we put a disclaimer here or something?
Well,
Yeah,
this isn't the first time that Chris Benoit will have been on the show because we've covered Royal Rumbles, but this is the first singles match we'll cover of him. We thought that it would be incorrect to cover Eddie Guerrero and just ignore Chris Benoit because their careers paralleled for so many years. They were such best
even
friends.
at the end.
And when they both died like a year apart from each other,
I believe.
Well, two, I believe. They ended up being the angel and the devil. And here they are, much earlier in their career.
And I guess as much as it's useful or to say it now, I guess trigger warning several minutes in that if you don't want to hear an episode, that will be kind of a bummer because it is about a tragic figure and another much more tragic figure peripheral to. I understand if you maybe don't want to mess with this episode. We got plenty of other
And
more
it
fun
gets
ones.
worse.
Yes,
it gets worse. This is gonna be a dark fucking episode. To your point, Evan, about Benoit and Guerrero, I think you're really right that much of what made them great, much of that dedication, it really is very problematic for wrestling fans that Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit died the way that they did, because it had a lot to do, I think, one with the damage that they did to their bodies, and also in the pursuit of being great wrestlers. And also, I think psychologically, at least in the case of Benoit, getting so deep into his character and living his life through wrestling to the point where he had trouble, besides just the brain damage he had, but he also psychologically had trouble distinguishing between his fantasy life and reality.
And as much as we want, wrestling is such a great representation of worker exploitation and what happens, and there is always somebody who's worked in innumerable crappy service jobs and delivery guy jobs and stuff like that in my life. There is in the realm that they call quote unquote unskilled labor, which is a bullshit term at all. Requires a fucking you work in retail all day and not kill anybody and tell me that that's not a fucking skill.
I did for years, and I somehow did. Man, I shouldn't make killing jokes on an episode with Benoit.
No, but I'm just, there is inevitably this arms race that happens where the worker who goes furthest in pursuit of excellence at the job, is inevitably held up as this is the role model. This is the person who is setting the standard and should be looked up to. And inevitably what happens is there are some people who are going to be driven to the point where they will take it much further than anybody else should. And while it is their it is hard to draw the line between personal choice and systemic pressure in almost anything, certainly in this scenario. I think it can't be ignored that those guys, they'll tell themselves that they're making the choice to do this, even though they know it's destructive, but it still sets the precedent where everybody else is inevitably going to feel that pressure to live up to it. And, I don't know what the answer is.
I want to add, because we haven't mentioned it yet, both of them felt incredible pressure to be as physically large as possible.
Despite not naturally being big people.
Yeah, it's a problem in wrestling that has, it hasn't been solved today, but it's much less of a problem than it is today. In the mid-90s, when Bret Hart won the title at 230 pounds or whatever they announced him at, it was oh wow, they're going with a little guy. So
Jesus Christ.
When you're Eddie Guerrero,
Bret Hart is huge too,
Yeah, he's 6'1", 230 pounds.
When you see him next to the interviewers, he towers over them.
Right.
They announced him at 2:34.
2:34, right? Yeah, good, Ben, good. They announced Shawn Michaels at 2:27. You know,
I would say I'm like 220, 225, and if you replaced the amount of that is fat with muscle like a wrestler, I feel like I would be a terrifying person.
yeah, they were. It was coming.
I would be a
fresh.
large man. Yeah.
Don't sell yourself short, Evan. You're already a terrifying
I
person.
know. It's the baldness that's really adds to it. I think
It's the baldness and the existential horror we can see in your eyes.
Speaking of
Well,
baldness
yeah.
and existential horror, you have to understand they were coming off the Hulk Hogan era, where this guy was,
That was
6'7" and 300 pounds and screaming at you. Where
Flawless
Randy
victory.
Savage. Thank you.
Sorry, I wish
Thank
I had a drop board like for drops, but I don't have the. We don't have the budget for that, so I'm just gonna do mouth drops.
Randy Savage was the little guy compared to Hogan. And that was only a few years before this. So Eddie Guerrero, all like 5'6", he's a little bigger than Rey Mysterio, really. You know,
He was still competing against Hogan for spots in WCW.
yeah, he knew that, and it didn't, it doesn't work. This guy's so little. Yeah, and both Eddie and Benoit had that problem, and it was a big part of what led to both of their deaths and a large reform in the wrestling business.
One last thing I want to say about our covering Benoit before we move on. We talked about this before starting the episode. As horrible as the end of Benoit's life was, from all reports, his life until that point, he was a pretty good guy. People mostly have really nice things to say about him, which cannot be said for a lot of other people who we cover on this podcast, including Art Barr, who I found some things. I don't know if I knew it already and forgot or just learned them, but we'll talk about that as we go on. Just again, a disclaimer for anyone who is troubled by this kind of stuff. It's going to get really, really dark this episode.
And you can't blame it all on CTE, but as the
You
science,
can blame a lot of it on it.
as the science develops, we're learning that you can blame a staggering amount of shit on CTE.
So Eddie Guerrero, as I get to know more and more younger fans of Eddie Guerrero, who were fans of Eddie Guerrero when they were little kids, a common thread is that they're used to this kind of darkness, and Eddie was the light who pushed through it all. And in this episode, we've already talked a lot about like the end, but this episode is about young Eddie Guerrero, pre-North American largely wrestling Eddie Guerrero. And our first match between Eddie Guerrero under a mask as Black Tiger 2 versus Wild Pegasus, young Chris Benoit. The two would wrestle hundreds of times over the years, and this was at the Super J Cup 94, a legendary tournament of light heavyweight wrestlers when all of these guys who were under like 230 pounds got together and said, hey, we can do this. Led by Jushin Liger, and they did, and the great Sasuke, and they did.
And right away, I like something that I thought of almost immediately with Eddie is that like he has, like I was thinking about him in comparison to Jericho as somebody who like he can do it all. Like he seems like he's just really good at all of the different things you need to do for wrestling.
Oh yeah, everything. He was the total package.
I also really got the feeling that, and maybe this is real, maybe this is not, who knows, but like, it's sort of like when I don't know, if you're at a job and you meet two people in senior position, or like, I don't know, maybe like you're in school and there are two students that and they are both equally brilliant, but you can just kind of feel that one guy worked hard, but maybe also sort of coasted to that position, and one guy put in an amount of work to get there, and the fact that he's that good and put in that much work is like terrifying. And that's kind of
that's Eddie.
That's the feeling that I get, where like Eddie like has like the same level, at least my feeling of it is that he has like that same level of skill and natural talent, but that he like that he just earned every drop of it. I don't know how real that is or how much I can articulate exactly what I'm feeling here vibe-wise.
I think I agree with you. And on that same token, he worked so hard, and he's also incredibly generous. Like he did a job match with Paul London, who was he was a new upcoming guy from the Indies, and he got, a chance to be a jobber on WWE TV on SmackDown, and Eddie let him get some shit in, which you usually don't do in job matches, and then apologized to London that he couldn't do more for it, and with Doc talking about Eddie being this light coming out of the darkness, it sort of makes sense that he was also surrounded by all of these other people who had really tragic stories and really dark lives. And he seemed to be the kind of guy who, just befriended anyone and tried to help anyone, no matter how fucked up they were.
He was a religious guy, and people who knew him who were also like Christians said they would go to him for like sermons and advice the way they would go to like their local pastor or priest, because that's who he was. They knew they could go to him and be like, Eddie, I'm a sinner, buddy, right? And Eddie would tell them something, and they would try and live their life better.
Like a true Christian.
Right, exactly.
Yes,
like the
not
Jesus
like
type
the
Christian.
ones that vote for Trump.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
Eddie very abstractly reminds me of Raphael Sadiq, who's a great R&B musician and songwriter who's also produced a ton of hip-hop. He was in Tony Tone Tone.
Oh.
Actually, not 100% sure how to pronounce that. He was like the main guy in that, and then went on to he's produced like dozens of like massive hits like throughout the last 30 years, in addition to releasing solo albums that range from, modern hip-hop to like he made an album that's like a straight up like 50s rock and roll throwback, that kind of shit. And I read this interview with him where he was like, oh yeah, like I grew up in Oakland, and like all like my, all these, like my brother died and all my best friends died, like all this stuff, and just like had this life marked by horrible tragedy. And they were like, oh, how come like that doesn't like inform your music? Your music's all like very joyful and happy and all stuff. And he's like, yeah, that's why it's joyful and happy.
I've already been sad enough.
Yeah, like I'm trying to make music that would help somebody who feels the way that I feel. Like,
I love to contrast that. I saw an interview with Henry Rollins once where they were reading some of his poetry about like how awful it is to be human, and how the people around you will kill you for $1, and how your family sucks and your friends suck. And they were like, man, you must have had a rough childhood. And he was just like, nope, my parents were great. I love my dad. It's like, right. So he had to find the darkness elsewhere.
Right.
And I guess if you had a life that was relatively peaceful and stuff like that, you should be aware, and you should try to be as viscerally aware as possible that other people have had a dark and shitty life, so you can have a level of empathy.
Rollins is a very interesting figure.
Oh yeah, I loved how Henry Rollins, while we're having an episode about sad things, right after Robin Williams,
the sad episode.
right after Robin Williams passed away, Henry Rollins wrote this like very emotional and raw thing about like how upset he gets about suicide, like he feels like anger towards like people who commit suicide. And then the internet was like, hey, what, you shouldn't say that, Henry Rollins, it's a thing people struggle with. And then Henry Rollins wrote a second post that was like, people said this, and that's and I've thought about it, and let me amend what I was, and not like a bullshit apology, but a real like, I really learned, and thank you for pointing this out. And then the whole internet was like, I can't stay mad at you, Henry Rollins.
He specifically said, everybody continue sending me your hatred about it, because I was wrong.
I will say, side note, whenever people talk about the concept of cancel culture, whatever, anytime I've ever seen somebody like get in internet trouble for saying something dumb and then come back and be like, hey, I really thought about this, and here's what I learned, and I want to do better in the future. People pretty much get over it.
Yeah, people are reasonable.
Yeah.
There are always going to be a few people who hate everybody, and most of those
and
people
never forgive anybody.
Yeah.
Most of those people, if you click on them, inevitably have about 25 followers, because nobody wants to be fed hate all day long, except for those people.
So, getting back to the match, Eddie is Black Tiger the Second. The Black Tiger gimmick was created as an antagonist for Tiger Mask. Originally, the first Black Tiger was Mark Rollerball Rocco, a British wrestler who had just recently passed away. The Black Tiger is always a gaijin, is always a foreigner. And I think it's really interesting, as we'll see, that Eddie plays the foreigner in Japan, in Mexico, and to some degree in the U.S. as well. He's always the foreigner.
Yeah.
So this match is the quarterfinal match, the second round of the Super J Cup tournament. Eddie had beaten Taka Michinoku in the first round. Benoit had gotten a bye to the second round. And Benoit actually goes on to win the whole tournament. But, this match, all right, so this is the bad match for this week just because it's so fucking sad. But
it's a great fucking match.
It's a great match. Yeah. The finish is a little weird.
It's not an American-style finish. It's a very Japanese-style finish. We're used to, finishing move, and the Japanese style, it's more sports-like. It's well, any cover could end the match. He fell. He was stunned. It only takes 3 seconds. Good effort, you know?
Yeah, Eddie, he goes for a crossbody off the top rope, and Benoit just reverses it into an arm drag, and then pins him off the arm drag.
Are Eddie's reversals the best reversals?
They're incredible.
They're up there.
Everybody's moves in this match and also in the Malenko match we're going to talk about.
Oh, man.
All three of these guys have a lift and a snap and a bounce to all of their movements that is just incomparable. No one has had that technique ever again or ever before in wrestling.
Because it's these controlled snaps where it's like watching great martial artists where they know exactly how much being able to control your explosive force in your muscles is bonkers to me. It's that level of control is just amazing.
It's by far the hardest thing to train. Of all the main things to train your muscles to do is to jump and to push your body around in 3D, you know?
and to do it in a way that's not, because that's not just as hard as I possibly can. Being able to bring some nuance to it is
it's one of the reasons.
Incredible.
It's one of the reasons why I enjoy a basketball game sometimes. The ability to, to pivot and jump and go back and forth, and all at the same time. Talk about explosive force. Throw the ball through the hoop from any given point on the net while a bunch of other tall dudes are putting their hands in your face. That's impressive to me.
I never realized. I was listening to somebody talk about. I remember Dennis Rodman being really, being a personality in the '90s and being around and popular. I don't really know much about basketball, and just having a lifetime of not really being super into sports.
We'll watch one of his matches
but learning
one
a little
day,
bit
yes.
recently. What'd you say?
I said we'll watch one of his matches one day. Yes.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Wait, are there? Is there a Dennis Rodman?
Oh, yeah.
Holy shit.
Oh, yeah.
The worm.
That's
Dennis
so
Rodman.
he doesn't know.
He was in
He
the
doesn't
NWO
know.
Hogan.
Okay. All right. This is incredible. I'm glad I brought
What
this up.
have you
then.
done to yourself, Evan?
I'm glad I brought this up. I did not realize that he had a supernatural rebound ability that still nobody to this day has been able. He just had this fucking brain that could see somebody shoot the ball, and he already knew if it was going to go in or not and where he had to be to get it.
It was his job to get the ball to Michael Jordan. He would be one of the all-time greats, and he'd score no points in a game, and it would just be no, it was his job to get the ball and throw it to Michael Jordan, who would then put it in the hoop. Because if Michael don't got the ball, he can't score.
So the other side of the technique is the fucking nasty impacts of all these moves.
Oh, they're all hitting each other so hard.
I'll always remember Benoit's power bombs. Because, you have a big guy power bomb someone. They, drop them from a great height in a way that they can control their bump and whatever. But Benoit would just fucking drive motherfuckers into the mat as hard as he could.
And in this episode, in this match, they're doing it extra hard because they're in Japan, where that's literally just the style there. It's real.
Yeah, and you're surprised that their bodies fell apart at the end of their
Right.
lives.
In their 30s.
But really, Eddie, But really, Eddie and Benoit, of all these very well-traveled guys of this generation, they were the most well-traveled.
They were, yes.
Eddie had a full run in Mexico, a full run in Japan, a full run in ECW. Benoit had the same thing except substituting Canada for Mexico. And they just mirrored each other so fucking well. And from the beginning to the end, even that Royal Rumble that we watched, they started the Royal Rumble against each other.
Right, because they wanted to send out a guy they wanted to humiliate on national television out at number 3.
Good times.
And-
It was 4 because
It was 4.
Hardcore Holly also came out. I'll look this up.
Yeah, well, Hardcore Holly is not somebody we'll ever do an episode on.
But he was another one that liked to
2005
punch
Rumble.
people.
That's true.
Yeah. It was Daniel Pewter, and yes, Holly came out third or fourth.
I think
or
it was
whatever
04 because that Tough Enough was in 03. I could be a year
No, it
off.
was
I'll
05.
double
It was
check
05.
everything.
Oh, no, wait. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 05. Because Benoit came out, he had won the year before. And then it was
yeah.
He's starting off at the top
must have
again.
been
Okay, you're
05
right.
then.
It's 05.
Okay.
So, so any other thoughts about this match, Evan? I mean, there's not really much to say except it's great. And it's,
Okay.
it's
This
so
was-
sad because it's so
Okay.
great.
Just to clarify, Eddie came out, then Benoit came out, then Pewter came out. They started beating on him. Then Hardcore Holly's music plays, and you fully realize what's happening.
Yeah, this was arguably my favorite match of the 3.
It's just because it was the shortest.
It was a top. All right, we'll get into the other.
I
will
think
say
this
there
might
was-
have been my favorite match of the 3 also. There wasn't a lot of wasted
Yeah.
motion.
No.
I have a lot of problems
is-
with Lucha, like conventions sometimes.
there.
I have problems with Lucha too, which we'll get to.
And yeah, I had some. I have the third match we'll cover comes close, but there's a couple demerits. But yeah, we'll get into. But yeah, I don't know. This was also just a solid introduction to, even though I had seen Eddie matches previously, like coming into it like, okay, now we're doing the Eddie episode. That's who I'm focusing on. This was a great first match.
Sure. All right, so I guess moving on.
Yeah.
So later in that year, later in 94, Eddie had still been wrestling in Mexico the whole time that he was going back and forth between Japan and Mexico. In Mexico, though, this show actually, it's the AAA and IWC co-promoted Worlds Collide event. It was a pay-per-view on November 6, 1994. It was actually in Los Angeles, and it was broadcast on pay-per-view in the U.S., and you get the WCW announce team of Mike Tenay and Chris Cruz announcing it. But still, it was all Mexican wrestling talent, and I did not see any white people in the audience.
Boy, did I have a
whatsoever,
fun
which
idea.
which is awesome.
Boy, did I have a fun time trying to figure out what the specific rules to this match were.
Well, okay, so
It did seem strange to be able to knock one guy out by pinfall and then have 2-on-1, because I'm like, then you're just gonna. That just seems like you're delaying the inevitable,
Yeah.
right?
well, it's not exactly that you're knocking them out. So, okay, so the match is Eddie Guerrero and the Love Machine Art Bar, a.k.a. Los Gringos Locos, in their red, white, and blue tights, against El Hijo del Santo and Octagon, the original Octagon. And it's a 2 out of 3 falls hair versus mask match. So the Los Gringos Locos mullets are on the line, and the luchadors' masks are on
It's
the
a
line.
very common lucha stipulation.
Eddie has a mullet that is, I would say, transcendent of the mullet style. Like Eddie's mullet is timeless and could, if you
Absolutely.
saw anybody at any time with that hair, you'd be like, that shit is glorious.
Eddie's mullet is the best mullet of all time.
Yeah.
Now, the importance
so-
of matches like this, I think, is best illustrated by the fact that Mike Tenay pointed out several times that Los Gringos Locos were, in fact, the World Tag Team Champions. And this match was not for those titles. It was for their hair. Titles mean different things in Mexico than they do here. They're not unimportant, but it's not like the journey to the top like it is in America as the standard thing.
So it's a 2 out of 3 falls match, but for each fall, you have to eliminate both opponents. But an elimination, practically speaking, if you've beaten somebody down enough to pin or submit them, they're probably going to be stunned for a while. But it's not like one of the partners had to leave the match temporarily, which I thought was what you were suggesting, Evan.
No, I don't know what I want. I just they one guy was eliminated by pinfall, and they were like, now it's 2-on-1, and then they beat him real quick.
A lot of
that seemed
stuff
dumb to
happened
me.
in this
Yeah.
match. I didn't
Well,
understand much of it, but a lot of stuff happened.
Part of the problem was the announcers didn't actually know the rules
No,
beforehand. They
and
figured it
that's-
out as
And
it
nobody
went along.
explained it to
Honestly,
them.
Honestly, with Lucha, I wouldn't be surprised if they were just making it up as they went along.
Well, I actually thought, and we said this a little bit about one of the Rey Mysterio matches we watched. This, to me, is one of the most coherent and well-told stories in a Lucha Libre match that I've ever seen. Possibly the most. I don't know. I was really into this match.
I
I was into it too. I was into it because I was trying to figure out what was going on.
I liked a lot of individual parts of this match, but it did not gel. I was bored by the end, even though I had been individually in certain moments been excited.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Like I kind of felt the same way. Like by the end, there were too many falls, and there was just too much like no selling.
It was a lot.
And I know like this match got 5 stars, right? Because nobody had ever seen anything like it.
Yeah,
in America
Meltzer
before.
gave it 5 stars.
But
he said it was one of the greatest pay-per-view matches
Of all
time.
the things Meltzer could give 5 stars, like I'm not saying this was a good match, but like why? Like this. Of all the things from that era, he could give 5 stars.
Yeah, and it is what it is.
It's his rating system. Whatever.
So a little bit about the guys in this match. Octagon, I didn't realize until Mike Tenay told us, got his name from a Chuck Norris movie.
I guess he did.
Did you
I
catch
did
that? He's cool. I thought his strikes were really good.
Octagon is
I
cool,
really
not Chuck Norris, just to make that clear to people.
Chuck
Octagon,
Norris is
yes.
Chuck Norris jokes are not funny anymore. He is a force of evil.
There are better martial arts movies starring white guys if that's really what you need, and that's the only reason you
make
need.
David Carradine jokes.
Yeah.
Don't make David Carradine jokes.
No, if we want to make jokes about a celebrity being indestructible, there's always Betty White.
Yeah,
True. Yeah.
Right. So, but I really liked Octagon, how he would, like, when he would break up a submission, he would just really nonchalantly swagger over and then kick the guy in the head really brutally.
Instead of the overdone, desperate leap.
Right.
Somebody does an actual spinning pile driver to somebody else in this match.
Oh yeah, Art Barr. That's what puts Octagon out. They take him out on a stretcher.
Yeah.
After that. It's a spinning tombstone, and they have to do it behind the referee's back because the announcer explains it has been made illegal because it is so deadly. I didn't realize. So El Hijo del Santo, obviously the son of El Santo, the legendary luchador who starred in like 49 films. His funeral at the time was like the largest ever attended funeral in the history
Buried
of
in his
Mexico.
mask. Or was that Blue
Buried in
Demon?
his mask.
No, that's Santo.
No,
for
Santo.
sure. Buried in his mask.
And what I didn't know was that the original Santo and Eddie's father, Gory Guerrero, were a tag team. They were the Atomic Pair. That's another thing that Tenay informs us about. Tenay is very informative throughout this entire
And
match.
still, nobody explained to him the rules of this match.
Right.
That's why I'm not like, oh, it's the announcer. No, Mike Tenay has always made it his business to know what's what. And if he doesn't know what's what, somebody needed to have told him what's what.
Yeah, that's the real signifier here for me, that they're potentially just making it up as they go along, is that Mike Tenay, the dude that they would put on commentary specifically in the lucha matches in WCW because he knew what was going on, had no idea what was going on.
So the first fall. So what happens is they do a Doomsday Frankensteiner. Eddie gets Santo with that and pins him, and then Tenay's like, "Oh, it's the end of the first fall," and then he's like, "Oh no, wait! I guess you have to beat both guys to score a fall."
Yeah,
Then they do their like brainbuster, their superplex frog splash combo to get Octagon. And I just want to say, so Eddie does the frog splash now as a tribute to Art Barr. Art Barr's frog splash is probably the best I've ever seen. I don't think anybody's
It's like the opposite of me. It's like he jumps so high, and I try to jump and fall over.
So what's
It's no lies detected.
So I really kind of like the drama of the having to pin both guys. Like, it adds a bunch of different other layers to the normal 2 out of 3 falls structure, which I find gets like kind of repetitive, where it's like the baby face wins the first, or the heel wins the first fall, and then the baby face ties it up, or vice versa. There's only so many versions of that you can do, variations on that you can do. But in this, so they get the first fall, and then Eddie does another like top rope Frankensteiner to pin Santo for the second fall. So they're only 1 pin away from winning. And then Octagon, like Art Barr does this alley-oop of Octagon to Eddie, but Octagon catches him in a Hurricane Rana and pins Eddie. And so like they're at the verge of being down basically 3-0, and you need 4 to win. And then he gets the first fall to like put them kind of back in the game. So I thought that was kind of a cool, exciting thing that they did.
There's more score.
Yeah. And then they do the Russian leg sweep to Barr. Santo gets a Russian leg sweep to Barr to tie it up. 1 fall apiece.
So what's bad about Art Barr? What makes him a monster? What's going on?
Oh, all right. Well, I was gonna wait until we got to the end of the match, but okay. So 2 weeks. So before we get to him being a monster,
There's set up for his monsterness.
There's also, I'm like afraid. There's a gravitas to your face here that I don't see often. So I'm worried now.
So less than 2 weeks after this match, you know, they were supposed to go to ECW together. They were Barr was going to go to Japan. Barr dies of
2 weeks after
drug-induced
this match.
heart attack. Less than 2 weeks
Holy
after this
shit.
match. Barr dies of a drug-induced heart attack. And it's like, oh, that's sad, but don't feel too bad. Like, the guy was literally a convicted rapist. Well, sexual assault. They reduced the charge from rape to sexual assault.
I
Now,
always forget that's a legal distinction. Ugh, it's
now,
horrifying.
apparently,
they got a lot
he
of
was-
distinctions over in
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
Now, apparently, he was in cocaine-induced mania at the time, which
Doesn't
I believe,
fucking
given
matter.
the way that he died. No, it certainly does not excuse it whatsoever. But Barr was a fucked up guy.
Yeah.
Like, Barr was a completely out of control maniac, and he wrestled for WCW. He had a Beetlejuice gimmick, and they called him the Juicer. But then they fired him when they found out about his earlier sexual assault conviction, which was from when he was up in Portland. Good friend of Roddy Piper. And so I think, I don't know exactly what was going through his head or whatever, but, you know, he had a wife and kid at home. They were about to come to the States to work in ECW. And I don't know, maybe he was just like, shit, that shit is going to come up again. And we don't know if he intentionally overdosed or whatever, but yeah, the dude was really fucked up altogether.
I mean, the world of wrestling inside in Mexico, especially back in the day, was still very like, you know, it was very like rock star analogous. You wanted to go as hard and as fast as possible because nobody was going to stop you. And it attracted the kind of people who were attracted to a scene where nobody was going to stop you. And a lot of people tried to then transition to like more sane scenes like in Japan or in America. And it just didn't work when they found out that discipline included like everybody else making sure you were straight up. And Art Barr would not have survived in America. He didn't.
Guys, there are no heroes in wrestling. Except the Hurricane.
Right, except the Hurricane. There are no heroes in wrestling.
You know, the dark part about it is like, for Eddie's career from then on, he like thought of it as a tribute to his good friend Art Barr. You know, he did that frog splash, and like that casts a whole other kind of shadow.
Yeah, Art Barr taught Eddie how to be hated. Because boy, did Art Barr know how to be hated.
Oh man, there's such good fucking heels here.
They were like as much as like Eddie Guerrero's the peak of his career was him being like the Mexican American hero, you know, from Texas and his whole family and everything. In Mexico, he was the American who was insulting the indigenous the indigenous peoples and the locals and so on.
They are upset with him.
And like
at the beginning, it's great.
Well, like Art is doing the like swimming motion at the crowd and stuff.
But once again,
they chant "Cállate"
almost
at them.
completely Mexican crowd, I might add. Yeah.
Right. And they say something about Proposition 187, like
a local thing at the time.
It was like an anti-immigration bill
I'm
that was
sure
being debated
it was something.
at the time.
Yeah, terrible.
Let's talk for a second, and this is also a point of darkness here about the seconds or the managers in this match. So we've got Blue Panther with Santo and Octagon. We have Madonna's boyfriend, Louis Spicolli.
What a name. And what year was this again?
94.
Okay.
94. Which is just an amazing gimmick. Poor Louis Spicolli also tragically died of a drug overdose only a few years after this. But he was a talented guy, and yeah, what a gimmick.
Yeah, Madonna's boyfriend. Jesus.
So the finish of the match is, we get the distraction. The ref is distracted. Art Bar hits the spinning pile driver, which kills Octagon. But
it
then
murders him. They spend half the rest of the video being like, we're carting off this dead body, and the other half just the wrestling match that's still happening in the ring.
So yeah, the ref is distracted again, and then Blue Panther comes in and illegally pile drives Bar.
What year was this?
And Santo pins
What
him.
year was this?
94.
94. Was Street Fighter 2 out there in the world at this point? Had we seen
I think it came
a
out
spinning
in
pile?
93, yeah.
Okay, because I was like wondering, because when I remember playing Street Fighter 2 as a kid and
Zangief.
being fine with the fireballs, fine with the sonic boom, but watching people do the spinning pile driver and being like, well, that's ridiculous. That's, come on. I mean, how do you
Zangief
stay
got,
up there like that? Yeah.
3 full rotations, more as the series went on.
Yeah.
So then Santo reverses Eddie Guerrero's full Nelson into a victory roll, and that is the deciding last pinfall that finally ends this thing. And I thought it was kind of beautiful that Bar and Guerrero cut each other's mullets.
That was great.
Like, that was a sweet kind of
Them
moment.
shouting and crying at each other, but just doing it.
I mean, if I was Eddie, I would be genuinely very upset.
Oh,
having
it's funny,
To cut my magnificent, beautiful mullet.
The quality of the sound on the video that we watched is low enough. I can't really tell what he's saying, but you just hear Eddie doing that angry Eddie yell he did, like just in that specific tone that he would yell it.
Yeah. The one match without, as far as I know, any problematic individuals
that we know of.
That we know, yeah. Who knows what Malenko, the Iceman, has done?
Dean Malenko only murdered things metaphorically, like how he crushed this match. Or he
Exactly.
destroyed the audience's expectations.
Look, they did not stand for criminals and otherwise ne'er-do-wells in ECW.
Oh, really?
That's
No. It was a haven of good behavior.
yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of standing, so this Eddie versus Malenko 2 out of 3 falls match, it was broadcast on the August 29th, 1995 episode of ECW Hardcore TV, which makes it just about 25 years old now. And we just passed the 25th anniversary. They get so the story of this match is everybody knew that they were leaving ECW. I love how Joey Styles puts the heat away from them and onto WCW and New Japan. Like, oh, it's because of the relationship between New Japan and WCW that they have to wrestle in WCW, so they're not going to wrestle here. Not that WCW is paying them a ton of money to go wrestle in WCW. But the ECW crowd, the famously, hostile
And shirtless.
ECW crowd, gives them a standing ovation from the beginning, from the ring announcements. This is the most loving, appreciative crowd I have ever seen in wrestling, to the point where the match is a draw. And every other time in the history of wrestling that a match has been a draw, the crowd has been up in arms. They've chanted bullshit. They've chanted 5 more minutes. No, this crowd immediately gives them a standing ovation. They are completely satisfied with this because they love and respect these wrestlers more than any wrestling crowd has ever loved and respected any
Yay,
wrestlers
everyone
before.
wins.
I mean, everybody did. This is a pretty great fucking match, I have to say. Like,
Yeah, you gotta love the Bischoff sucks sign in the crowd
banner,
throughout the whole thing. The
man.
banner.
That they just had at the ready.
now this is my one I have two issues with the match, two meta issues. One is that it did feel a little long, even though even though I say that every time about almost all matches. I don't know what I would have cut. I don't know if I would have edited any of it out. But it did feel a little long by the end. But we just watched a ton of wrestling for today's session. So
Yeah, a lot of these matches were long too. So if it was near the end, it felt extra long.
Here's the only, having now watched several Dean Malenko matches, fucking loving him, generally think he's a great wrestler. Here's my one issue with Dean Malenko, which is that he's such a good amateur wrestler that he kind of seems like an amateur wrestler that they got to come do professional wrestling, in the sense that every time he's pinned, I feel like I can see him going 1, 2, okay, up. Every time every time they're doing an exchange, I feel like he's going through in his head like, okay, I do that. He looks like a professional athlete who is now acting in a film, and is really he's really good.
Like, he doesn't really believe in his own head that he can be beat. So, like, he doesn't really come across as genuine in that way? Is that
not
what you're saying?
even that, but it is sort of like, he's like, okay, I'm here to wrestle. I'm here to do amateur wrestling. But then there's like, he doesn't have it in him to act in such a way where he is obscuring the fact that he's like thinking about it in a way that is performative. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, it does. Yeah, the people that made it further than him in the performance end of wrestling never looked like they were trying to do what they were doing. They were just going out there and doing it. He did always look like he was executing perfectly, and that he was methodically in his mind going one. Yeah, I know what you mean. Counting it off. Like the arm goes here and the leg goes here, and we go down, and I'm sell for a minute, and then I turn around, and then he's going to reverse me. You know, they try and teach that out of you in wrestling school.
Yeah. And I bet that if you saw him do an actual amateur wrestling match that was not booked or preconceived, he would not put out that vibe. You would get that like improvisatory sort of real sports vibe. And it's all the only criticism here is that he's like not as great of an actor as some wrestlers, but while still being like one of the best fucking wrestlers that I have seen so far on this podcast. Sorry, Ben, I keep interrupting you.
No, it's okay. We want to. The podcast is primarily for your opinion.
What you have to say, Evan. But I was thinking, no, I think you're right about that. At the same time, I think this match was almost entirely improvised, and I think you get the vibe of like two guys riffing off of each other. Completely. So even the bocce moments, and there are some kind of bocce moments, look cool. You know, there's one point where Eddie like springboards off the second rope, and I think he expected Dean to turn around, and he doesn't. And he just goes with it anyway and drops him on his head in a kind of dangerous, ugly-looking fashion, but it's fine.
The pace of this is really fan. Like the ebb and Malenko was great at that. Especially, I'm thinking of the match that we watched with him and Rey Mysterio, where it sort of alternated in these bursts of energy with him just holding the guy down. This had not quite as much of that, but he's really good at like pausing that match for a second, keeping the guy in the hold. But then him and Eddie, watching them just do these long chains of graceful reversals I could fucking watch that all day.
Oh, isn't it just beautiful?
Yeah.
Like everything leads into something.
You know, I didn't see this match until years after it happened. But when I would switch channels from Raw to Nitro on Monday nights, it was when I saw these two guys doing exactly what you were just talking about, Evan. Their beautiful, fluid chains of reversals that I was like, oh, this is cool fucking wrestling. This is the wrestling I want to see.
It seems like if you had somebody who knew everything about amateur wrestling and the sport of wrestling, and also was if you tasked somebody with coming up with like professional wrestling, like booked planned wrestling for the first time, and they were somehow somebody who knew about dance and performance art and also knew about wrestling but didn't know professional wrestling existed, right? If you were in that sort of alternate reality, they would come up with something like this. You would be like, oh, you would take the coolest parts of amateur wrestling and have it be very graceful.
By the way, Evan, most of this is not anything like amateur wrestling.
No, not
I know.
at all.
My entire conception
almost
of amateur
none of this
wrestling
looks like anything that they actually do in amateur wrestling.
This is traditional, technical, professional
Really?
wrestling.
Okay.
This looks a lot more
From like the Luthez
This looks a lot more like a match you would see in the 50s, except revved up a lot for modern day.
I guess my conception of what, because I haven't gone and watched any amateur wrestling at all whatsoever. I guess my conception is that the guys who make it look like they're doing more technical holds and reversals and stuff like that, in my head I'm like, oh, that's what it looks like.
Kurt Angle wrestles like an amateur wrestler, where he's just like, he's riding his opponent. You know, he's trying to stay on top of them, push their shoulders to the mat, just try to keep his weight on top of theirs.
I guess it's kind of like if I watched a Jackie Chan movie and then watched a Jet Li movie afterwards and was like, oh, well, Jet Li's actually doing like real martial arts on people because it looks more real and like less like quote unquote fake, but they're both executing elaborately choreographed moves. Like
maybe we should do an episode where we watch a bunch of amateur wrestlings. Like
I would enjoy that.
That's an idea, you know.
That is an idea.
Yeah.
We can watch one of Kurt Angle's like matches
when he won the gold medal.
He won the gold medal. You know,
with a broken.
There are
neck.
several professional wrestlers that
I don't
were
think you need to use
accomplished
that kind of
amateur
language.
wrestlers, and I'm sure we can find their matches.
For a guy with a PhD, you sure are vulgar.
We're doing.
I get to be vulgar here because I certainly don't curse in my actual classes.
No, never.
Oh no, not
We're
at
doing-
all. I don't like drop an F-bomb every so often just to keep myself and the students awake.
You're
No.
like you're a cool teacher. You like put on your a backwards baseball cap and then you sit on a chair backwards and you're like
You don't
and
ask them
you
to.
like rap about philosophy.
You don't demand that they wear shoes on Zoom.
What the fuck was I gonna say? Hold on. Amateur
Malenko.
wrestling, Malenko,
Eddie Guerrero, ECW,
Kurt
How
Angle,
about that
broken
front
neck.
row?
This is not helping. None of this is helping. All right, it's gone. Maybe it'll come back.
All right, well, I'll say a thing and maybe you'll remember. So one of the things I really love about Eddie in this match is his ability to kind of improvise and call an audible. Like, there's one point where Malenko drop kicks him in the knee, but like doesn't quite hit it, and Eddie like kind of sells it. You know, he doesn't completely no-sell it, but he also he's like, this is going to be ridiculous if I fall over from this, grazing shot.
kind of gets him in the ankle. So he sells it more like he got stepped on his foot or something. Like, hey,
I really like Eddie's spinning forehead stomp.
Yeah.
He does that in a couple of these matches. The first fall ends when he does kind of a messy roll-up on Malenko. The second fall ends when Malenko hits him with the fucking Alabama slam and then taps him out to the Texas Cloverleaf, which Joey Styles is sure to point out to us is not the Sharpshooter or the Scorpion Deathlock, because it is not.
it is a different hold.
Though many might
It looks like a painful hold.
Yeah, I like how he put Eddie Guerrero in the Texas Cloverleaf, and it looked good, and Eddie was trying to get to the ropes. But then before Eddie Guerrero submitted the fall, they had Malenko really cinch the hold up. Malenko really got it on tight where you don't want to stay in it for long, and everybody could see that, and then Eddie gave up. And that's much more realistic than a lot of tap outs you see in professional wrestling.
Definitely. One of the things I really like about the Texas Cloverleaf is, unlike the Sharpshooter, you can't put the Sharpshooter on someone unless they're unconscious or they let you. Getting your foot between their legs in that way, that's the thing that we're gonna guard against the most, right? But the Texas Cloverleaf, if you're strong enough and you cinch up their legs in your arms like that, you can just pull someone over. It's much more realistic.
It is fun to try to figure out which moves you could actually do on somebody and which ones require somebody helping you out.
you know, being a kid and a wrestling fan, you and your friends figured all that out.
Like, you could get one of your friends in the figure 4, but not the way they do it on television, because nobody will let you turn around. Hogan would occasionally do the figure 4, and he'd just step into it, which, you know, because he wasn't going to get countered.
Right.
It still looks shitty.
Yeah. So I like how they really picked up the pace for the third fall, and they started like doing high impact moves, dropping each other on their heads and such. Malenko does that fireman's carry gutbuster like better than he's ever done it before or since.
Yeah, it looked like it hurt a lot
Before
more.
or since, yes.
It looked like it hurt a lot more than any time he ever did it in WCW, that's for sure.
He's thick in a way that like him and Colt Cabana sort of remind me of like a thwomp, but in like person form.
Yeah.
Like not just trying to smush Mario, but like Purple Rose of Cairo out into the world as like a thwomp man.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you work out a lot and you eat good, but you don't like diet like you want chiseled abs. You just like, I eat food because my body wants me to eat food.
That my physique that I'm going for is I work out a lot and I eat a lot of bread.
Yeah. Bread is see, I still eat a significant amount of bread, but I eat a much better bread than I used to when I was a little kid.
That's really I will say I have met people who, I mean, there's people who just legit have celiac, obviously, and need
that's a whole different story.
Gluten-free. But like I have known people who claim to be gluten intolerant, and then I'll make fresh bread, and they'll eat it and just eat like a reasonable amount of it and be fine, because I think it's just there's so much shit in artificial bread products, and also we eat just America, just all of our portions. We eat until we want to die.
Literal shit. Look it up.
Oh,
well,
God.
a lot of wood pulp, like cellulose, but
It's true.
Anyway, yeah.
So last couple details about the match. Eddie does this like head scissors whip or whatever, and Joey Styles doesn't know whether to call it a Frankenstein or a Hurricanrana, and then he makes the great call, a rose by any other name would still be just as awesome.
That's pretty good.
In the end, Malenko does the O'Connor roll with the bridge. All 4 shoulders are down. They both get counted down.
Everybody
and the match is
loses.
a draw.
Yeah.
Indeed.
There is no winner, as they say, and the crowd loves it. Every second of it.
Almost all of them.
Almost all of them.
Almost everyone. Because then we get the promo from Eddie where he's like, hey, man, to the one guy in the front row who thinks he sold out. Like, that's cool, man. That's your opinion. I respect you.
That's just like your opinion, man.
Right.
Yeah. And then I love the look on Eddie's face when Dean reaches for the microphone. Like, you want to talk?
Now, Malenko to this point had not said a single word in his entire ECW run. His gimmick, the shooter, meant he was essentially a hitman. He would stand there with that stone face, and, then he'd get in the ring and murder people.
He was like basically
Not
trying
literally
to be
murder people.
like the Iceman, like Richard Kuklinski.
Yeah, they called him the
name.
Iceman
Okay,
in
that's-
WCW. Later.
I see.
Yeah. Exactly the same thing.
But he gives a really good speech.
Yeah, he does. At one point, the crowd starts cheering, and he puts his hand up to kind of quiet them down, and you see Eddie in the background riling the crowd up. Like, no, wait for them to calm down, then keep talking. That's how that works.
And then the crowd calms itself down. Like, you see a bunch of the guys in the front being like, come on, guys, come on, let Dean talk.
Right.
But yeah, it was beautiful and heartfelt. And then, they hug everyone. Was that Carrie Silkin in the front row hugging Eddie in the baseball cap?
I don't know.
I recognized a lot of people. There was Mary
Yeah.
Kate, who was the photographer for Ring of Honor years later. And of course, all of the ECW usuals, hat guy and beard guy and shirtless guy.
Shirtless guy was really distracting.
Was this the first ECW hug?
Probably not.
Probably not. ECW had a wide range of emotions. That was its appeal.
Oh,
More
that's
than
nice.
just, people, it's like, it's the violence. It's like, no, it's the emotion. Everybody was extreme. So if people liked each other, they'd probably have a hug.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
There is, man, I watched the ECW stuff, and as objectionable as a lot of the content was and a lot of the attitudes was, I can't help but kind of miss this sort of culture.
It was fun.
Yeah, exactly.
People were really expressing themselves. You know, they were really letting it all out there. For better or worse.
As much as like culture has tightened up a lot for the purposes of progression, there will be a time where there will be a hole somewhere, and it's not going to be the same one that was expanded in like the 90s. And people are going to find it and they're going to expand it, and people are going to get like essentially they're going to get whatever the modern version of Rude is again, and that's going to get cool and that's going to get popular, and 15 years later there's going to be a backlash against it. So let's have fun with it, whatever it is.
But I think on the other hand, like part of the problem is in this case, you know, everyone's expressing themselves in person together, you know, where like if you piss someone off, they can fucking punch you in the face.
Right. Really? You know? I'm allowed to do that?
You can. You can, yeah. And it, like, you know, you have to be tolerant to a certain degree or else you're just going to be fucking fighting in the streets. Whereas people actually do express their horrible opinions just as much now. They just do it semi-anonymously online where no one can punch them in the face, and the hatred just gets to mount and mount and mount and mount without, you know, any of that kind of release until, unfortunately, hopefully not, but it's looking like that's where we're heading. These tribes just get hate more and more and more and more hate-filled until they're literally going to be fucking killing each other in the streets because they don't see each other as human.
Because
anymore.
Nobody just punched each other in the face once, and then like, and then that person's friends are like, you really shouldn't punch someone in the face. And then the person who got punched is like, well, fuck that guy, but maybe I need to cool it. And then everybody's a little angry, and you cool off.
I didn't know. People were all been having civil wars for a long time, and punching each other in the face only fell out of style in like the mid 90s. Like if any of us were 20 years younger, had been born 20 years before, we would have had to be prepared for physical violence all the time.
Well, I'm not saying so much that like, look, this was the mid 90s.
This was the mid 90s,
and these people weren't punching each other in the face. They were civil to each other
for the most part.
Degree. And yeah, you know, and we didn't have a civil war in the 90s, despite the fact that I think, you know, people have been as politically divided, you know, as they are now before. It's just the emotions, the pitch of their hatred for each other on the basis of those political divisions is greater now. I mean, there have always been fucking racist assholes. It's just, you know, those racist assholes get to talk about being racist assholes a whole lot more in a public forum.
And I do also wonder sometimes if there is like, this is a discussion I was having with somebody I was very close to earlier today, who was talking about, you know, she had this perception that things were more civil at one point in time, or that there's like a level of like respect that's been lost. And I think that if you really go into like what people were saying publicly in the civil rights era, through the Reagan years, like even if there wasn't as much widespread media, it's not significantly better, and B, I also sometimes really wonder if part of why things are growing so much more extreme, and we are all becoming more extreme, even if we're centrists, we're like extremist centrists now. I do wonder if that is because we have genuinely been trying to have a reasonable discussion with each other, or at least many of us have been trying to have a reasonable discussion for decades, and after a while you just run out of ways to calmly explain things to each other. And we have perhaps gotten to a point where we have explained ourselves so thoroughly and the points are so clearly made that I don't know that
I mean, this is the problem with the breakdown of truth. Because now, you know, there with the advent of so much media, you can assign truth to contradictory things, and enough people will agree with those things. And not just the big things either, all the little things that go with it. And this isn't unprecedented in the world, but it's certainly a big problem right now. You know,
Yes.
So arguments and conversations don't mean anything if the truth means different things to different people.
One truth that we can absolutely agree on is that Eddie Guerrero is one of the greatest wrestlers who ever lived. We will be doing more episodes about him.
Oh yes, we're
a lot.
we're just scratching the surface.
At this point in my time of wrestling understanding, obviously I have softened a lot from my initial hostility to wrestling. I don't know if we've just had a really good streak lately where we're watching some of the greatest people of all time. But Eddie Guerrero is, I think now that I have a bit more of an understanding of what the art of wrestling is. Eddie Guerrero might not be my favorite, but I so far kind of think he might be the best of anybody ever, just in terms of like having just doing everything that you should be doing in wrestling as well as it can be done.
And I can't wait
it.
for you to see what he does later in his career in the WWE, where he really develops his personality in wonderful ways, problematic ways to some degree. I mean, there's a lot of, he gets a lot of stereotypes draped on him, and he does the best that he can with them, But yeah, I look forward to getting your reactions to all of that as we go on.
If you enjoyed this episode, you should check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/contestingwrestling, where we put out an extra episode every week. Sometimes it's a compliment to the episode that comes out for free. Sometimes it's part of a series, like we're doing bad movies starring wrestlers, or we're doing episodes of Lucha Underground as I go through my first wrestling serial. And spoiler alert, Lucha Underground is awesome, and if it had been around when I was younger, I would totally be a wrestling fan because it's an excellent television program, and it's cool to watch. Follow us on Twitter @ContestingW. Let us know what you think, if there's anything you think we should cover, if there's anything you want to know, if you just want to say hi, that's totally fine.
Now, this part's really important. If you need to complain,
yes,
you send it to @ScribeBen.
If you have positive things to say about me personally, I'm @Evan Burke, etc. If you have bad things to say about me personally, send them to @ScribeBen. Actually, no, that'll give him ammunition. Don't do that. Send the bad stuff to me too. I'll just handle it.
Or, try to find me in person, and I may or may not punch you in the face.
And while all of you are feuding with your various Twitter handles, I'm making a ton more content. Follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/DocDiamondFire. I stream video games a lot, usually something Mario related. You can find my YouTube channel, which is also a gaming channel, at Doc Diamondfire Gaming. You can follow me on Twitter at @DrDiamondFire. It's at Dr. Diamondfire because Doc Diamondfire is too long for Twitter by one character. And that's all of my stuff. I should plug my stuff at the end of more episodes. I just always kind of stifle it and don't.
Oh yeah.
And follow me at Ref Katie, Katy.
Yeah, follow her at Ref Katie.
You can also go to my YouTube page, also at ScribeBen. Some listeners have been asking about our theme song from Evan and my old band God Ox. The entire God Ox record, Abyssal Gigantism, is there on my YouTube page, and some other
stuff. It's a hell
stuff.
of a listen.
This has been Contesting Wrestling. We love you.
Bye.